Let me ask a big, ridiculous question. What do you think is the meaning of this whole thing? We talked about at the beginning of the conversation about death and the fear of it. The other big question we ask about life is its meaning. Do you think there's a meaning to our existence here on this little spinning ball?
That's you've thrown some powerful questions. That's the most powerful. For most of human existence, the meaning of life was very, very simple. Survival. The only thing that humans cared about was just surviving, because it was so damn difficult for the early years of human existence on this earth. If you look at ourselves as biological agents, everything about our body is set up for one mission, and that is survival. Every reflex we have, every element of our structure is just built up on the battle to survive. And then humans did something remarkable. They elevated themselves through the use of technology and social structure to the top of the food chain, so that they went from extremely vulnerable. If you take a naked human being alone and put them in the Serengeti Plains in Africa, they're in some deep shit. Okay, if you look at a human being as a survival organism, just by itself, naked, they are among the most feeble at that task in the entire animal kingdom. You compare us with predatory animals. We are weak and soft and easily killed. But if you take that same human and put them in a group and you give them basic technology, steel, a spear, a knife, he goes from the bottom of the food chain to pretty much at the top. And so humanity found itself in a crisis that emerged out of its own success. For most of its history, their only interest was the battle to survive, and they did it. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. They got through ice ages, droughts, famines, disease, everything, and they found a way to get to the top of the food chain. And that's where it all got interesting. Because an organism whose only interest was in survival had, for the first time in their history, a more or less guaranteed survival. And so the big question now is, now what? We survived. There's no more danger. The average human being finds himself in a world now where there's almost zero danger from predatory animals, where getting a meal is the easiest thing ever, where getting to and from work is not problematic at all, where the majority of infectious diseases, medical complaints can be resolved in a hospital fairly easily. And so they start casting their mind around, okay, what do I do now? And so the minute mankind's existence became more or less guaranteed, the problems shift from survival to meaning. And we found ourselves grappling with a whole new issue that had never occurred to our ancient forefathers, but which now becomes one of the centerpieces of our modern lives.
I mean, when you look at your own life, when you look back, that you think, I did a hell of a good job. You know, Hunter S. Thompson has this line that I often think about, that life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in roadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, wow, what a ride.
That's good.
Which is the complete opposite of survival. well, not complete opposite of survival, but basically embracing danger, embracing risk, going big, just living life to the fullest. So within that context, what would make you proud of a life well lived? When you look back, you, John Danaher, looking back at your life.
First, I will address that question, but let's first look at why Hunter Thompson could say that. Because his life was more or less guaranteed and safe.
Yes.
If you look at animals in the animal kingdom, the pattern of their life is very simple. They take the least risk possible to secure their existence. Lions are powerful creatures, but when they go hunting, they typically go for the weakest animals they can kill in order to eat, because they don't want to take the risk of injuring themselves, knowing that if they do, they die. So the brute reality is the only people who can talk about having casual danger in their lives are those whose lives are guaranteed.
And a fascinating small tangent, Hunter S. Thompson took his own life. So that seems like a deeply human thing, is suicide.
Yes. That's a fascinating question in itself. If you look at the number of suicides per year, it's a shocking statistic that gets almost no recognition. And yes, uniquely human. You don't, very, very few animals you see killing themselves, because their whole thing is just survival. And that humans, paradoxically, when survival is more or less guaranteed, are killing themselves in vast numbers. It's usually linked back to the idea of meaning, because it's so hard. It was hard to win the battle for survival, but it's 10 times harder to win the battle for meaning. When I think about it, first off, I'll say right from the bat, there's never going to be an agreed upon sense of meaning. As I said, there was one thing that our physical bodies agreed upon, and which is hardwired biologically into us, and that's survival. But once we got to a more or less guaranteed survival, then all bets were off. At that point, you just have to start listing your own criteria, and what one person will describe as a meaningful life, another person will decry as meaningless or wasted. There's something terrible about the idea that we're sitting around, waiting for meaning to show up on our doorstep. But what I find the best people do is they take charge of it, and they look at their lives in a form of authorship, where they see their life as a tale to be written, and they do their best to write that tale and put as much control over the direction of this story as they can. In the end, we all have to just try and write our own story. We all have our own interests. I try to bring in the sense that even though I'm an atheist, I don't believe that we go on to live after this. I believe that there's a possibility of a God and an afterlife. I don't say it's impossible, but in order for me to believe that they exist, I'd have to see better evidence than I see currently. Nonetheless, I do believe that there is a great value in the idea of living for something bigger than yourself. The moment you see yourself as the be-all and end-all of your existence, you're in for a meaningless life, and nothing will ever satisfy you. You can have all the money in the world, you can have all the power in the world, you'll be empty inside. I do believe that humans have a deep and abiding need to follow the interests of a group bigger than themselves as an individual. Is it ideal? No. Is it an answer to the meaning of life? Nope, because eventually that group will itself die out. So there's a sense in which it just plays a kind of delaying game. But I do believe that in order to live a happy life, meaning is a central part of that, and the deepest sense of meaning, not a fully complete answer, but a better answer than most people give, is to find something which hopefully does very little harm to the people around you and mostly benefits them, which enables you to become part of a community and to live, as I said, for something larger than you as an individual.